Hi, we're A+ Water, and today we are going to show you how to install your brand new DuraWater whole house water softener with the Fleck 5600 SXT digital control valve. For consistency's sake, we will be following along with our Fleck 5600 SXT water softener installation guide that is included with the purchase of your new DuraWater water softener. Before beginning, be sure to have all necessary parts and tools for installation. Included with your new system is a mineral tank that is preloaded with up to 2 cubic feet of resin, a brine tank, the Fleck 5600 SXT control valve, a bypass valve, a brine line fitting kit, a drain barb, and an upper basket. There are some additional parts and tools that you will need that are not included with your shipment. These include 1/2 inch inner diameter drain tubing, a flathead screwdriver or 1/4 inch nut driver, pliers, channel locks or a wrench, tubing cutters, lubricant, plumber's tape or Teflon tape if you will, and a hose clamp to secure your drain line. While installation hoses are not required, we do recommend them as they will make plumbing in your system a whole lot easier. For the first step, verify that the riser tube inside the mineral tank is sitting flush with the tank collar. The riser tube should be at a maximum 1/4 inch above the top of the mineral tank. Once you verify the position of the riser tube, you can move on to prepping and installing the control valve. We will start by lubricating 2 O-rings. Silicone lubricant works best for this, but cooking oil is a good substitute. Do not use any petroleum-based lubricants. Apply a small amount of lubricant to the tip of your finger and lubricate the larger O-ring as you see here, and also the smaller pilot O-ring that's just inside the smaller hole. Next, locate the upper basket and install it. Place the basket into the bottom of the control valve with the larger end going into the valve. Once it has seated into place, give it about 1/8 of a turn to lock it into position. Once the control valve O-rings have been lubricated and the upper basket is installed, it is time to install the control valve onto the mineral tank. Slide the control valve and upper basket as one over the riser tube in the mineral tank. Press down to make sure the riser tube seats into its O-ring seal securely. Once you feel the riser tube seat into the control valve, you can then tighten the valve onto the tank by turning it clockwise. Do not apply any plumber's tape or Teflon tape on these threads. Tighten down the valve until it feels snug on the tank, and then give it another 1/4 of a turn max. Do not over-tighten this because it can result in damage. After securing the control valve to the mineral tank, we can move on to attaching the yoke to the bypass valve. If you have a stainless steel bypass valve, skip this step. To attach the yoke to the bypass, apply some lubricant to the O-rings found on the male coupling points on the bypass valve. Next, loosen the screws on the bypass valve to give yourself some clearance and push the yoke onto the bypass, making sure you feel those O-rings seal. Once you have it on, you can tighten the screws, ensuring that the silver clip is holding both the yoke and the bypass together. Be extremely sure not to over-tighten these screws because you can cause damage. Simply tighten the screws until you cannot wiggle the silver clips. Now, we will be attaching the bypass and yoke assembly to the meter assembly that you can find on the back of the control valve. Our first step here is going to be lubricating the O-rings found on the male connecting points of the meter assembly. Then, slide the bypass valve over said O-rings, making sure you feel them seat into place. We will now be using the silver clips and screws, similar to the last step, to hold everything together. Again, be very careful as to not over-tighten these screws. This process is the same for a stainless steel bypass valve, but you will not have a yoke after the bypass. After connecting the yoke to the bypass valve and the bypass and yoke assembly to the meter assembly, you are now ready to start plumbing in your water softener. Remember that any water filtration system must be plumbed in after your pressure tank always, if applicable. The first step here is going to be to shut off your main water supply to the home. We also recommend opening a faucet nearby to get all of the remaining water out of the pipes so that it's not getting in the way during the installation. Once you have the main water supply shut off and drained, you can now move on to attaching the water softener to your house plumbing. There are many solutions to accomplish this, ranging from the more professional copper hard pipe install all the way to the super easy do-it-yourself flexible stainless steel install hose approach. Do whatever works best for you. If you are uncomfortable doing the plumbing yourself, contact a licensed plumber to complete the installation. The most important thing to note for this step, whether you did the plumbing yourself or not, is to make sure that the inlet and outlet for the softener are correct. The water should be coming into the softener from your water supply on the right side as you're facing the control valve and out to the home on the left, as you can see by the arrows notated on the bypass valve. It is also worth noting that not all water softeners plumb in the same direction, so if you are replacing an old unit, double check that the inlet and outlet are on the correct sides. Once the water softener is connected to your plumbing, ensure that the bypass valve is in bypass position. You can verify this by making sure that the two knobs are going east and west, forming one horizontal line with each other, not going north and south looking like parallel railroad tracks. If they look like railroad tracks, the bypass valve is in service position, meaning that water is turned onto the unit. Go ahead and turn those knobs counterclockwise to ensure that they are in bypass position. We will be keeping the bypass valve in the bypass position until the startup procedure, which we'll get to later. Once you can ensure that your water softener is connected to your house plumbing and that the softener is in bypass position, we can move on to turning your main water supply back on. Slowly open your main shutoff valve over the course of 5 to 10 seconds to gradually introduce pressure to your new plumbing connections. Once fully open, you can check the surrounding install area for leaks and address them if necessary. Now, we will prepare and connect the brine tank. In order to assemble the brine tank, you need to attach the brine well, which contains your safety float assembly, to the brine tank. After removing your brine line from the brine well, if applicable, line up the holes on the brine well with the holes drilled into the side of the brine tank. Shapes and styles of brine tanks may vary, but the process is the same no matter what. Now, put the overflow elbow through the bottom hole with the drain bar part and any rubber gaskets on the outside of the brine tank. Now, place the brine well over the threaded end of the elbow and secure with provided nut. This is a bit of a tight fit, so if you need a bit more room to fit your hand inside, you can remove the nut that holds the safety float in the well, which is opposite of the holes drilled in the brine well. Then you can pull the safety float up and out of the brine well. This should give you enough room to secure the overflow elbow nut. Once the overflow elbow nut is in place, replace the safety float if you removed it. The brine well should now be secured to the brine tank. Now, we can move on to attaching the brine line to the safety float assembly. Before beginning this step, check that both sides of the brine line have brine line stabilizers inside. The ones we provide are brass. Once you can confirm that both ends have stabilizers inserted, you can attach the brine line to the safety float assembly by pushing the brine line through the top hole on the brine tank and into the safety float assembly fitting. You should feel the brine line snugly seat into place. Once it is snugly in place, tighten the nut as tight as you can with your fingers to secure the brine line in place. You should not be able to pull the brine line out of this fitting. It is worth noting that there is a variation of this fitting that is more of a quick connect fitting. If you have this variation of brine tank, just insert the brine line into the quick connect fitting and ensure that you cannot pull it back out. As simple as that. Now, we can attach the other end of the brine line to the control valve. For this, you will need the small parts found in your brine line fitting kit. First, slide the brass brine nut onto the brine line with the threads facing towards the open end of the brine line. Next, place the white ferrule fitting on the brine line with the bigger end going on first and the smaller tapered edge facing the open end of the brine line. You will also find a small metal mesh screen in this fitting kit, but we do not recommend using it, so set this aside or discard it. With the brass and white plastic fittings in place, we can now secure the brine line into the control valve. Do this by inserting the brine line into the brass fitting on the right side of the control valve and then tightening down the brass nut onto the threads. This connection is brass on brass, so you do not need to worry about over tightening this. Just get it as tight as you need, ensuring that you cannot pull the brine line out of this fitting when you're done. Now, we can move on to installing the drain barb so that we can get ready to run our drain line. Apply about 4 to 5 wraps of plumber's tape or Teflon tape around the threads of the barb fitting, and then screw it into place in the back of the control valve. Do not over tighten this as it can cause the housing to crack. Once the drain barb has been installed into the back of the control valve, it is ready to have a drain line secured onto it. Slide a hose clamp over the end of your 1/2 inch inner diameter tubing. Connect the tubing to the drain barb by wiggling one end over the barb until the tubing is flush with the base of the barb. Tighten down your hose clamp onto the drain line as close to the base of the barb as possible until it is snug. You should not be able to pull the drain line off of the barb at this point. Now, you will need to find a drain point for the water softener. Some common draining solutions include washing machine drains, floor drains, P-traps, and standpipes on a main drain. Ensure that the drain is at least 1.5 inches in diameter. Always make sure that there is an air gap of at least 3 inches between the end of the drain line and any wastewater in the drain. Never tie multiple systems into the same drain line or use any additional fittings on the drain line such as check valves. Also be sure to secure the drain line at the drain point to prevent any messes, as the drain line will move around under pressure and can potentially remove itself from the drain point if not properly secured. Always remember to follow all local plumbing guidelines and codes when finding a draining solution. Now, let's move on to programming the control valve. Again, we'll be following along with our installation manual where you can conveniently find the complete programming guide. We also have a separate programming video if you are looking for a more detailed walkthrough of each of the settings. For now, we are just going to fly through these settings as a basic set of guidelines for you to get started. All of our valves come pre-programmed from the factory and only need a couple minor adjustments to get dialed in. There are only a few settings you need to worry about changing, which we will mention shortly. Leave the rest of them as they come from the factory. The first setting that will come across that may need adjusting is the capacity or C setting. Set this to whatever size system you have in grains. For example, if you have a 48,000 grain system, set this to 48. If you have a 32,000 grain system, set this to 32, and so on and so forth. Follow this chart for reference. The very next setting you'll come across is the hardness or H setting. Set this to the value of your water hardness in grains per gallon. If you have a water test result that is in parts per million or milligrams per liter, divide that value by 17.1 to get the hardness in grains per gallon. The next setting that may need adjusting is the day override setting, or DO. Set this to 14, which is the default setting if you are on city water, and set this to 7 if you are on well water. The last setting that we need to worry about changing will be the brine fill or BF setting. Follow this chart in order to determine what to set this setting to, as this setting is determined on the size of your system. Once you have finished programming your control valve, we can move on to the startup procedure. Before beginning, be sure you have completed the pre-startup checklist. This means your control valve is secured to the mineral tank, plugged in, and programmed. Your bypass valve is attached and is in the bypass position. Your drain line is secured at the valve and drain location. The brine line is secured at the valve and at the safety float inside the brine well. And while facing the valve, the water inlet is on the right and the water outlet is on the left. Once you have completed the pre-startup checklist, you can move on to the startup procedure. Start by adding 1 to 2 gallons of water and at least 1 bag of water softener salt to the brine tank. Then, if you have a plastic bypass valve, slowly open the inlet side of the bypass valve over the course of 5 to 10 seconds to gradually introduce water pressure to the system. You will hear the tank filling up with water. Once you hear this tank stop filling and the inlet side of the bypass is completely open, you can move on to the next step. If you have a stainless steel bypass, just slowly turn the lever until it is fully open after 10 seconds. Next, leaving the outlet knob of the plastic bypass valve closed, begin a manual regeneration on the system by holding the cycle button on your control valve until you see BW appear on the screen. You will hear the valve clicking, and after a few seconds you will hear a surge of water going down the drain line. Once water is moving at full speed down the drain line, check for any leaks around the system and the drain location. If at any point you notice any leaks that you need to address, just close the bypass by turning either the plastic bypass knob back to the bypass position, or if you have a stainless steel bypass, turn the lever back to the bypass position and that will shut the water off to the system. Now, we just wait for the system to finish its regeneration process. This will take about 90 minutes altogether. You will know that the regen is over when the time of day is displayed on the screen instead of a timer that is counting down. After the softener is finished regenerating, open the outlet side of the plastic bypass valve slowly over the course of 5 to 10 seconds, similar how we did the inlet earlier. Again, if you have a stainless steel bypass, just leave the lever in the service position. The next step will be to set the time of day on the control valve to the correct time of day if you haven't done so already. To do so, hold either the up arrow or the down arrow to get the time to start moving, and once the correct time of day is displayed on the screen, tap the cycle button to lock in your selection. The last step in the startup procedure is to open up a nearby cold water faucet and let the water run for a couple of minutes. The water may be discolored at first and you may have some air in the lines, but let the water run for a couple of minutes and it all should clear up. Let the water run until any discoloration disappears. Congratulations! You have now successfully completed the installation of your Fleck 5600 SXT water softener. I hope you all found this video helpful. If you have any questions, you can either comment on this video or reach out to our office directly by using the contact information in the description. Thank you for watching and have a great day.